Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Brazil's Senate votes to remove President Dilma Rousseff from office for manipulating the budget. 13 years in power of work comes to an end. Michel Temer sworn in as new president. Big blow to the Islamic State. Chief strategist and spokesperson of the terrorist group Abu Muhammad al-Adnani killed in a US-led coalition airstrike in Syria. Zika virus outbreak worsening in Southeast Asia. Number of cases in Singapore goes beyond 100. Several foreign nationals test positive for the virus. Spike in number of Zika cases prompts countries to issue travel advisories. Twin bomb blasts rock Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in Pakistan. Attacks leave at least 12 people dead and dozens others wounded. Pakistani Taliban faction Jamaat-ul-Ahrar claims responsibility. Our top focus on the show this week. Brazil's Senate has voted to remove President Dilma Rousseff from office for manipulating the budget. It puts an end to the 13 years in power of her Workers' Party. While the decision is a major blow for Rousseff, analysts say it might not mark the end of her political career. Meanwhile, Michel Temer has been sworn in as president and will serve out until January 1st, 2019. Here's more.
Proclamo o resultado.
I give the result. 81 senators voted. There were no abstentions. 61 senators voted yes. 20 senators voted no.
Sim, 61 senadores.
It was a result most had expected, leaving Brazil's first female president out of a job. The country's Senate voted 61-20 to remove President Dilma Rousseff from office, finding her guilty of breaking budgetary laws. The vote marked the culmination of a contentious impeachment process that has dragged on for months. However, there was some relief for Rousseff as she was not barred from the ballot if she wants to run again. A motion to bar her from holding any public office for the next 8 years failed. Meanwhile, Rousseff continues to remain defiant, reiterating that her removal was a coup. Rousseff said she will not say goodbye, adding, "See you soon."
They have overthrown the first women elected president of Brazil without there being any constitutional justification for this impeachment. The coup will affect every democratic political organization.
Michel Temer, Rousseff's former vice president who has been serving as interim president since her suspension, will assume the office of president and serve out the remainder of her term. Temer, a leader of the Brazilian Democratic Movement Party, was sworn in on Wednesday. Temer, who will govern till 1st of January 2019, has promised to boost Brazil's economy, which is undergoing a recession.
The time is one of hope and of resuming confidence in Brazil. The uncertainty has come to an end. It's time to unite the country and put national interest above the interest of specific groups.
Ecuador and Venezuela recall their diplomats after the impeachment, with Venezuela also freezing its relations with Brazil. However, Temer received support from the United States as well as UN that maintained that the country's institutions acted within the constitutional framework. The dramatic day of impeachment in Brazil also saw protests both for and against Rousseff. Rousseff was suspended in May after the Senate voted to go ahead with the impeachment process. She was accused of moving funds between government budgets, which is illegal under Brazilian law. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And joining me for a chat today to talk about this is Mr. BS Prakash, former ambassador to Brazil. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Nice to be here.
You know, as far as the Senate vote went, everyone expected Dilma Rousseff to be impeached. But then did you expect it to go the way it went, 61-20?
I think the Brazilian Senate has many parties, and therefore till the last minute there was a lot of horse trading, shall we say. It was expected, as you said rightly, Frank, that the impeachment process will go through, and then the rest of it, I guess, is really haggling. So numbers, it was clear that they would get the required 2/3 number. Beyond that, the actual number I don't think is very significant.
Indeed. But in a separate vote, the same Senate said that they are not going to bar Dilma Rousseff from contesting any future polls. And, the vote to bar her from contesting or having a public life for the next year did not go through.
Right. So again, that might be a part of the understanding. We don't know. And it might be people who committed to this change may not have been convinced that she really deserves to be or should be kept out for a very long period. So all this is a kind of a political give and take, I guess. But in a sense, I think it's good that she would remain in politics, because certainly I think it was not right, it would not have been right for her to have been out of the political arena altogether. That's my judgment.
And it also marks the 13-year-long rule of the Workers' Party in Brazil. How significant is that?
I think what's happening now is that there is a certain amount of polarization within Brazilian politics and economy. The Workers' Party clearly is a kind of a socialist party. They did a lot of social welfare programs, the minimum wages went up, number of benefits went up, and there was greater equity that came into effect in the last 13 years, first under Lula and then under Dilma. On the other side are these kind of, shall we say, pro-capitalist, pro-free market forces kind of parties, the rightist parties. They are saying that all this is wasteful expenditure, Brazil cannot afford it, what we need is growth, and that's what, as we heard just now, Michel Temer says that what we need is growth. So I think Brazilian politics will be really the main contest will be about this economic policy. Should we be looking after the interests of the industrialists, of the rich farmers, of the wealthy people, of the urban people, or should we continue in the tradition of the Labour Party of Lula and Dilma, which is let the common man's life also improve? So that will be the kind of the issue that will unfold in the coming years.
Indeed. And talking about Michel Temer, what do you think are going to be some of his biggest challenges in the next 2 odd years?
I think that's very clear. Irrespective of what has happened, Brazil has a huge economic challenge. The main challenge is because the whole world, for instance, but particularly China, which is important, the demand for Brazilian products, commodities has come down. Brazil's economic slump, one of the main reasons is because the demand in China, they were just exporting raw materials, minerals, agricultural products. The demand has come down. So Brazil, which was growing at, let's say, 5%, in the last few years has a negative growth. So to reverse growth is the first challenge, and that is what he says. But then comes the challenge, even if you get a modest growth, what about continuing with all these social programs? What about all these handouts from the government? What about the Aam Aadmi and the Garib Aadmi? So in a sense, that debate with which we are very familiar in India, not only growth but economic justice, social justice, he may not be as sensitive to that aspect of it, the social welfareist aspect of it, as Dilma was or as Lula was.
Seeing all the political turmoil unfold in Brazil, there were several doubts cast on the Olympics, but that went on smoothly, and at the end of it, it was a successful Games in Rio.
I think that's a very wise observation on your part, and it's absolutely true. I agree with that. I think what it shows is a certain resilience of the Brazilian people and of the system, and of a certain amount of indifference to macro politics. I would say more than in many other countries, because this entire Olympics was organized by professional bodies, by Olympic committees. Government is important. I'm not saying it's unimportant. But despite all this turmoil, as you rightly said, volunteers did what they did. The civil society in Rio, the people were enthusiastic, and there were many, many other problems. We kept hearing about all that could go wrong, but it was a reasonable success, I think. First of all, it was peaceful. There were no major security or such hassles. It was reasonably well conducted, not on a grand scale like Beijing or London, but it was very clear. Brazil says that we are not in that league, but we will do what we can. and we will have fun. And that's what they did. I think there's a lesson for everybody here saying that not everything should be dependent on politics.
Indeed. And one very quick word finally before I let you go on Dilma Rousseff. Have you seen the last of the fighting lady?
I do not think that that would be expected, because she has been a politician and a technocrat all her life. She was a student leader. She fought when there was a military regime. She went to jail. Her biography is well known. She's a fierce personality. And then she managed big organizations as a technocrat. She may not be a political being in the sense Lula was or some other people are, but she will be committed to public life. And feeling so humiliated, with a feeling that she was treated very unfairly and unjustly, and many people would agree with that assessment, I think she would fight on. And it is an important party.
Indeed. All right. We'll have to leave it at that, Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you.
Well, moving on now, multiple terror attacks shook Pakistan on Friday. 4 heavily armed suicide attackers mounted a brazen assault on a Christian colony in Peshawar before being gunned down by security forces. In the second attack, at least 12 people were killed and 50 injured after a suicide bomber blew himself up in a court in Mardan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan. Here's more.
It was a day of terror in Pakistan. Dozens of people were killed in a twin bomb attack at a court complex in Mardan town in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. A suicide bomber threw a hand grenade at police guards before storming into the compound and blowing himself up. The attack was claimed by terror group Jamaat-ul-Ahrar, a breakaway faction of the Pakistani Taliban.
The grenade was thrown at police officials and they were wounded in the attack. The first blast was from the grenade and the second was from the 6 to 8 kilogram suicide jacket.
The blast came just hours after 4 gunmen attacked a Christian colony in Peshawar, an attack also claimed by Jamaat-ul-Ahrar. The attackers, wearing suicide vests, were killed during a gunfight with security forces. 1 security personnel was also killed and several others were injured in the attack.
The security guard saw the gang who were trying to go inside. He called out, but they did not respond. After that, he fired. 1 was injured. The other 2 barged inside.
Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said these terror attacks cannot shatter the country's unflinching resolve in the war against terrorism, even as the terror group vowed to carry out more such attacks. The Jamaat-ul-Ahrar group have targeted lawyers in the past, including a bomb attack in Quetta last month that killed more than 70 people, most of them lawyers. The group was also responsible for the attack on a government office in Mardan, in which 20 people were killed. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break on the program now, but still to come. Zika virus cases on the rise in Asia. Singapore, the worst hit. Several countries issued travel advisories for travel to Southeast Asia due to the spurt in Zika cases. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. In what's being seen as a big blow to the Islamic State, the chief strategist and spokesperson of the terrorist group, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, was killed in US-led coalition airstrikes on Tuesday. The group said that one of its longest-serving leaders died in Aleppo city of Syria, where he was overseeing external operations. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council met to discuss possible sanctions over the use of chemical weapons in the ongoing Syrian civil war. Here's more.
A US-led coalition airstrike killed Islamic State's chief spokesperson Abu Muhammad al-Adnani on Tuesday. The terror group said Adnani, who was responsible for attacks overseas, was killed in Aleppo province in Syria. Adnani was one of the last living senior members, along with self-appointed Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who founded the terror group. Earlier this year, he had called for massive attacks during the Muslim holy month of Ramzan. The UN Security Council meanwhile met to discuss possible sanctions over the gas attacks in the ongoing Syrian civil war. The UN investigators said that the Syrian government forces used chemical weapons twice, while the Islamic State group used the mustard gas at least once in the conflict. However, the Council failed to agree on any action, with Russia questioning the evidence from the independent commission.
The panel is acutely aware of the ongoing use of chemicals as weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. We also note with great concern that there is diversification of both the type of chemicals used and the actors involved. We cannot allow chemical weapons to become the norm of the already unspeakable conflict in the Syrian Arab Republic or anywhere else.
Syria's UN ambassador also dismissed the report's findings as biased.
Conclusions contained in the report were totally based on statements made by witnesses presented by the terrorist armed groups or their incubator environment. Therefore, these conclusions lack any physical evidence, whether by samples or attested medical reports.
The fighting continued on the Syrian border, with Turkish forces targeting the Islamic State militants in the city of Jarablu. Turkey has said that it will not stop the attacks until the threat is removed.
It is inevitable that flames that are burning us today would be burning you tomorrow. Those flames will burn you as well. We have always carried out our fight against all terrorist organizations within the laws, and we will continue to do so.
Turkish-backed forces began the offensive last week by capturing the Syrian frontier town of Jarablu from the Islamic State. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Moving on now, the outbreak of the Zika virus is worsening in Southeast Asia. In Singapore, the number of cases has gone up to 115, while Malaysia reported its first case of Zika on Thursday. A number of foreign nationals, including 13 Indians residing in the region, have also tested positive for the virus. The spike in number of Zika cases has now prompted countries to issue travel advisories to Southeast Asia.
The Zika virus is on a rampage in Singapore, with 115 locally transmitted cases being confirmed on Thursday. Those infected include a pregnant woman and dozens of foreign nationals. As many as 13 Indians residing in Singapore have also tested positive for the mosquito-borne disease. The Ministry of External Affairs confirmed that they were infected while working at a construction site in Singapore.
13 Indian nationals are being treated for the Zika virus in Singapore. This is information that has now officially been conveyed to us by the Singapore Ministry of Health. According to them, these patients are showing mild symptoms and have either recovered or are recovering. Their recovery process is being monitored closely. The cases seem to be localized in a defined area, as per the Singapore Ministry of Health. Our mission is in constant and close touch with the Ministry of Health of Singapore and will continue to follow up to ensure that Indian nationals receive full medical support.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry also said that 21 of its nationals have been infected with Zika.
Our embassy in Singapore was informed that 21 Chinese nationals in Singapore are confirmed to have been infected with Zika. The Chinese embassy in Singapore has issued notice to warn Chinese nationals to take precautions against the Zika virus.
Meanwhile, Malaysia also confirmed its first case of Zika on Thursday after a woman tested positive following a 3-day visit to neighboring Singapore.
This was the lady who returned from Singapore on the 21st of August, and a week after her return presented with features of Zika and subsequently was referred by a general practitioner to Sungai Buloh Hospital and has been found tested positive for Zika in her urine. And this is the first reported case, confirmed case of Zika in our country.
Indonesia too confirmed that one of its citizens had tested positive for the Zika virus in Singapore. The country has now warned pregnant women not to travel to Singapore. The country has also upped protective measures to scan for the Zika virus.
We will take protective measures across Indonesia, especially large cities where people are arriving from outside. These cities have become a place where we are deploying our officials.
Due to a spurt in Zika cases, a number of countries have now issued travel advisories to Southeast Asia. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's the roundup of the other international news of the week in Globe Watch.
The Clinton campaign announced on Thursday that the Democratic nominee raised a total of $143 million in August for her campaign and the national and state Democratic parties. Those accounts began September with a combined $152 million in the bank. Clinton's haul in August is more than 50% higher than both the total that she raised in July and that President Obama collected during the same period 4 years ago. It also all but ensures that Clinton will maintain her considerable money advantage over Donald Trump. Mexico's president rebuked Donald Trump as a threat to his country just hours after painting a positive picture of talks the two held on Wednesday. President Enrique Peña Nieto had hailed as open and constructive the impromptu meeting he held with Trump, who later referred to the Mexican leader as his friend and a wonderful president. Trump's quick acceptance of an invitation sent last Friday took Mexico's government by surprise, and his visit to Mexico City came just hours ahead of a keynote speech on immigration as he sought to close the gap on Democratic rival Hillary Clinton. Hundreds of thousands of people marched through the Venezuelan capital in rival demonstrations. Opposition supporters, staging their largest rally for 2 years, called for President Nicolas Maduro's removal. They blame him for Venezuela's economic crisis and accuse the Electoral Commission of delaying a referendum that could shorten his stay in power. Maduro, whose supporters also rallied in huge numbers, accused the opposition of trying to stage a coup. Turkey's Ministry of National Defense in a statement on Thursday said more than 800 Turkish military personnel have been discharged from service as part of an ongoing probe into the Fethullah terrorist organization. A total of 820 land and sea forces personnel were discharged, with 648 of them in custody. The latest round of discharge includes commissioned and non-commissioned officers, but no generals. Thursday's dismissals raised the total number of discharged personnel to 4,451, including 151 generals. The Philippines president, who had rallied against the United Nations for criticizing his government, has declined a request to meet UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. A UN spokesman said that contacts had to try to set up a time for a meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN Forum in Laos next week, but that no time could be agreed upon. A Foreign Affairs spokesperson in Manila said that 11 heads of state had requested meetings with the Philippines president during the ASEAN Forum, and he had said yes to 9 of them.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week in sports action. Russia's Paralympians will not be allowed to participate in this month's games in Rio under a neutral banner. The International Paralympic Committee on Thursday further enforced a blanket ban on the country after revelations of a widespread state-sponsored doping program. A statement from the committee said nearly 200 Russian athletes who applied to compete independently would not be granted the right to do so. Bernard Tomic was sent packing early at the US Open, and his minimal earnings were offset by a $10,000 fine levied on him for a crude outburst he directed at a heckler during his first round loss. The Australian, angered by a heckler in the stands during his upset loss to world number 72 Damir Zumhor on Tuesday, was caught on camera directing a number of sexually explicit comments towards someone in the crowd. Williams Formula One driver Felipe Massa announced plans to retire at the end of the 2016 season ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. After 14 years in F1, the 35-year-old Brazilian driver competed in 242 races and won 11 Grand Prix over his tenure, placing him in the ranks as one of the most experienced drivers in the sport. The last race of the 2016 season in Abu Dhabi will be Massa's 250th race, capping off a career where the Brazilian drove for Sauber, Ferrari and most recently Williams. Lionel Messi marked his comeback from retirement with a goal to give 10-man Argentina a 1-0 win over Uruguay on Thursday that lifted them to the top of the South American qualifying group for the 2018 World Cup finals in Russia. In a match of few chances, Messi created something out of nothing 3 minutes before half-time. Surrounded by defenders, his shot from outside the box took a deflection on Jose Maria Gimenez and wrong-footed goalkeeper Fernando Muslera. It took Messi's record as Argentina's top scorer to 56 in his 114th international. 2 goals from teenage prodigy Gabriel Jesus fired Brazil to their first ever qualifying victory in Ecuador on Thursday to reignite the South American Giants' 2018 World Cup qualification campaign. Jesus underscored his status as one of the brightest talents in Brazilian football with 2 late goals as new coach Tite's reign got off to a dream start with a 3-0 victory. The 19-year-old forward also played a key role in Brazil's opening goal, winning the penalty which Barcelona superstar Neymar duly converted in the 72nd minute. And finally, Spain's annual world-famous food fight, La Tomatina, took place on Wednesday. The fight brought thousands of locals and tourists together to throw tomatoes at one another and has been held in the Valencian town of Bunol since 1945. At this year's fiesta, 160 tons of ripe tomatoes were offloaded from trucks and given to the crowd. The tomato slinging lasted for an hour and yielded gloriously saucy results. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. See you again next time.